I'm leaving you and moving to Scottsdale with my 27-year-old lover. I've taken all our money with me. The text arrived at 2 a.m. local time in the North Sea, just after I'd completed a 15-hour shift on the platform. My name is Jonathan Morgan. I'm 54 years old and have spent the last 25 years working offshore oil installations across the globe. My hands were still stained with grease when I opened the message from Ellen, my wife of 16 years. I stared at my phone screen as another message appeared, a screenshot of our joint account balance showing zero where $156,000 should have been. She'd added a little smiley emoji as if this were somehow amusing. I didn't throw my phone, didn't slam my fist against the wall, just sat on my bunk in the cramped quarters I shared with two other engineers and typed, "Okay. Good luck." Then I turned my phone off and went to shower. The crew noticed something was off the next day when I skipped breakfast and went straight to work. Phillips, my second-in-command, kept glancing over during equipment inspections but knew better to ask questions. We had 18 workers depending on us to keep this floating steel island safe and functional. Personal problems remained personal. During my lunch break, I checked my email. Ellen had already filed for divorce and claimed I'd abandoned the marriage by working overseas too much. She'd hired an attorney named Garrett who specialized in high-asset divorces. They were requesting spousal support based on my excessive income. She even had the audacity to mention that her emotional support companion was now living in our house in Dallas. I closed my laptop and returned to work. Didn't mention it to anyone that night. I wrote one email, not to Ellen, but to my sister Alicia, a forensic accountant in Houston. "Time to activate Protocol Autumn," I wrote. That was our code phrase from years ago. No explanation needed. 3 minutes later, her response, already on it. "Don't respond to anything until you're back on shore." I had 12 more days on this rotation. 12 more days of 14-hour shifts in 40-degree weather and howling wind, while the life I thought I had disintegrated back home. The crew would have understood if I'd requested emergency leave. But what would that accomplish? Better to finish the job and collect the paycheck. When I returned to my quarters that night, the rig supervisor, Garrett, stopped by. "Everything stable?" He wasn't just asking about the drilling operation. "Everything's under control," I replied, and it was more than Ellen would ever realize. I met Ellen 17 years ago at my friend's marine supply store in Dallas. She was 32 then, working the register, full of jokes about customers who thought sailing was just about looking good in boat shoes. I was 37, already 12 years into offshore work, home between contracts and helping my friend inventory equipment. We married 10 months later. Quick, but it felt right at the time. I'd already built a comfortable life, owned my house outright from a fortunate investment in a small energy company that got acquired, and had a secure career path on international rigs. She said she admired my reliability, my determination. I admired her vivacity, the way she could engage with anyone. The rotation schedule was always the challenge. 6 weeks on, 3 weeks off in those days. But the compensation was exceptional. I could earn in 6 months what most people in our area made in 2 years. We agreed it was worth it. She'd maintain the home front. I'd build our future. Around year 10, the first fishers appeared. Small things. Complaints about missed anniversaries. Questions about whether I really needed to accept the Norwegian contract. Comments about how her friends' husbands were always present for social gatherings. Looking back, I should have recognized the signs. The year I turned 49, she stopped asking when I'd be home. Stopped sending photos of her activities. Our video calls grew shorter, but I dismissed it as the natural progression of a long-distance marriage, comfort replacing excitement, routine replacing uncertainty. Last Thanksgiving, I returned home to find she completely redecorated our house without mentioning it. New furniture, new paint, new everything. When I inquired about it, she simply said she needed a change. I didn't ask what kind of change she meant. 3 months ago, I noticed transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. Home improvements, she explained. The kitchen needed renovation. I drove by our house before departing for this rotation. No sign of construction, but there was a silver Mercedes I'd never seen parked in our driveway for days. She stopped answering my calls altogether, just sending texts saying she was occupied with a new project. I almost flew home early then. Instead, I convinced myself to trust my wife of 16 years. 4 days ago, our neighbor Mark sent me a photo of a moving truck in front of our house. "Thought you should know," was all he wrote. I didn't reply. Just wait. Sometimes the wisest action a person can take is no action at all. Sometimes the truth reveals itself. I completed my shift the day after Ellen's text and headed back to my quarters. The satellite phone rang. It was Alicia. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "Just tell me." She didn't sugarcoat it. She's been planning this for at least 16 months. Regular transfers to a separate account under her maiden name. Started small, $3,000 here, $4,000 there. Then larger amounts over the last 60 days. Total of $237,000 moved. Not just the $156,000 from your joint account. The room seemed to tilt sideways momentarily. That was significantly more than what showed in our joint savings. "There's something else," Alicia continued. "She changed your beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy 8 months ago, and she took out a $50,000 home equity line of credit against the house, forged your signature on that one." I sat on the edge of my bunk, suddenly aware of the deep hum of the platform's generators beneath me. 16 years together, nearly 2 decades of shared life, and she'd been methodically erasing me from it piece by piece for over a year. The guy is Ryan Fletcher, 27, like she said. Former personal trainer. No significant employment history in the past 4 years. 3 previous relationships with women over 45. Each ended within 18 months. I didn't need the pattern spelled out. Alicia's voice dropped lower. "There are credit card charges for 2 one-way tickets to Scottsdale dated for next Thursday." That was 4 days from now. She hadn't just left me. She was disappearing, trying to vanish with everything before I even made it home. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my quarters for a long time. Didn't turn the lights on. Just sat there watching memories rearrange themselves in my mind, like puzzle pieces falling into a different picture. The late-night phone calls she'd take outside. The sudden interest in fitness 4 years ago. The complaints about finances despite our comfortable savings. What struck me hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was the planning, the calculated, patient dismantling of our life, while smiling to my face, while accepting the money I sent home, while telling me she missed me. Something shifted inside me then. The hurt crystallized into something harder, colder. I walked to my locker and pulled out my laptop. Accessed the email account only Alicia and I knew about. Logged into the holding company we'd established 7 years ago after I watched a colleague lose everything in a divorce. Autumn Ridge Holdings, my grandmother's maiden name, and the creek running through our property combined. The account balance loaded, $1.9 million. I'd been diverting 65% of my income there for 7 years. Legal, declared on taxes, but separated from our marital assets through the corporate structure Alicia had designed. I sent a single email to my attorney in Houston, proceed with Operation Reclaim. Then I closed my laptop and went to the mess hall for coffee. For the first time in days, I felt hungry. I landed in Houston 42 hours after my rotation ended. Alicia met me at the airport, handed me a burner phone and a folder of documents. "She's been calling your regular number nonstop since yesterday," she said as we walked to her car. The bank froze the account she transferred the money to, standard procedure for large, unusual movements. "They're requesting you appear in person to verify. She doesn't know you're back. No one does except me and James." James was my attorney. But that's not the most interesting development. She pulled out her tablet and showed me a series of text messages. They were between Ellen and someone saved as R. I skimmed through them. Plans for their new life. Jokes about me working overseas while they spent my money. Details about the house they'd already put a deposit on in Scottsdale. But one exchange from 3 days ago caught my attention. "Ellen, bank froze the money. Need John to verify in person. What do we do?" "R, he's still offshore for 12 more days." "Ellen, tell him there's an emergency with your dad. Get him to authorize you to handle it. You're still his wife." "Ellen, he's not answering my calls." "R, try harder. We need that money before the house closes next week. Or we need to look at Plan B." "Ellen, I'm not comfortable with Plan B." "R, it's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. People have accidents all the time." I handed the tablet back to Alicia. My hands were steady but cold. "Are these admissible?" I asked. "They're from the cloud backup of her phone. She used your Apple account credentials to set up her new phone last year. Never changed the password. Everything syncs to your cloud storage." We drove straight to James's office. He'd already prepared divorce papers, a criminal complaint for the forgery on the home equity loan, and an emergency motion to freeze all assets. "There's a complication," James said once we were seated. She filed a domestic violence claim against you yesterday. Says she left because of ongoing emotional abuse and financial control. Claims she was in fear for her safety. That's absurd, I said. I've been 5,000 miles away for the past 8 weeks. Doesn't matter. It's a tactic to gain sympathy with the judge and justify taking the money. Her lawyer's pushing for an emergency hearing tomorrow to get a restraining order against you and exclusive use of the house. So she wants to ban me from my own property while her boyfriend lives there? James nodded. And there's more. The home equity loan, she already spent it. Transferred it to an LLC registered to Ryan Fletcher 2 days after receiving it. I took a deep breath. Options. We counterfile immediately. Fraud. Forgery. Alienation of affection. Criminal conspiracy based on those text messages. We request an emergency freeze on all her accounts and the LLC. He slid a document across the desk. And we file this. I looked down at the paper, motioned to dismiss domestic violence claim with evidence of perjury. What evidence? James smiled thinly. Your location data from your company's security badge shows you've been on that oil platform for 8 continuous weeks. Your passport entry and exit stamps confirm it. And I subpoenaed your phone records showing all calls between you two for the past year. Nothing suggesting arguments or threats. I signed where indicated. One more thing, James said. We need you to appear surprised when she's served. She can't know you're back yet. For now, you're still officially at sea. I nodded. I can do that. As I left James's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Ellen to my regular number. Please call me. It's an emergency. I need you. I didn't respond. The trap was set, but not by her. I stayed at Alicia's place that night, sleeping better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I logged into the security camera feed for our house in Dallas, a system I'd installed 4 years ago and maintained remotely. Ellen had either forgotten about it or assumed I couldn't access it from overseas. The footage showed a young man lounging by the pool, drinking from my collection of scotch and wearing what looked like my old university sweatshirt. He was on the phone with someone, laughing, feet up on the outdoor furniture I'd crafted by hand. While I watched, Ellen came into frame. She looked anxious, pacing as she talked. I couldn't hear the audio, but her body language was clear. Things weren't going according to plan. Alicia came in with coffee. You should see this, she said, opening her laptop. She'd spent the night investigating Ryan Fletcher's background deeper. What she found changed everything. He's done this 4 times before. Alicia turned the screen toward me. Each time, the same pattern. Meets a woman, usually married, always financially secure. Relationship develop. Woman leaves husband, taking whatever money she can. They move away together. Within 18 months, he disappears with whatever's left. The screen showed news articles, court records, social media posts. For women across 6 years, all left financially ruined. One still paying off credit card debt Ryan had accumulated in her name. There's more, Alicia said quietly. He was briefly a person of interest in the death of his second girlfriend's ex-husband. Suspicious boating accident 8 weeks after the divorce filing. A man drowned in a lake he'd sailed on for 25 years. No charges were ever filed. But the implications hung in the air between us. My phone rang. Ellen again on my regular number. I let it go to voicemail. You should hear this, Alicia said, playing the message on speaker. John, please. I need you to call the bank. Her voice cracked with what sounded like tears. There's been a misunderstanding with our account. I was just moving money to a safer investment like we talked about. But the bank froze everything. I can't access any funds. Please call them and tell them it's okay. I'm really scared. We talked about no such thing. The performance was convincing. I'd have believed her 2 weeks ago. She's desperate, James said when we met him for lunch. The house closing in Scottsdale is in 6 days. They need that money. What's our next move? I asked. The emergency hearing is this afternoon. Judge Ramirez is presiding. She has zero tolerance for false domestic violence claims. We have your documented alibi ready. And the bank funds, we filed to have them returned to you exclusively. But there's something else you should know. James slid a folder across the table. Your neighbor Mark sent these to my office this morning. Inside were photos of furniture being loaded into a moving truck. My furniture. Family heirlooms. Things that had been in my family for generations. They're clearing out the house, James confirmed. Planning to disappear whether they get the bank money or not. I closed the folder and handed it back. Change of plans. Both looked at me. I want to go home. That's not advisable. Not to confront them, I clarified. To watch from Mark's place. I want to see this with my own eyes. Alicia and James exchanged looks. And I want to be there when they're served. Not hiding behind legal papers. I want Ellen to see my face when her world collapses. James nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. As we left the restaurant, a text came through on my burner phone. It was from Mark. They're packing your grandfather's writing desk now. The one you restored. Thought you'd want to know. Some thefts go beyond money. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. This had just become personal in an entirely new way. The 5-hour drive to Dallas gave me time to think. James arranged for the sheriff to serve papers at 9 a.m. the next morning. Alicia set up surveillance from Mark's house across the street, where I'd stay overnight. Everything was in place. Mark greeted me with a silent handshake when I arrived just after midnight. He was a retired mechanical engineer who'd worked offshore himself for 25 years. No explanations needed. She has no idea you're watching? I asked once we were inside. None. They've been busy packing all day. Loading the valuable items, abandoning the rest. He pointed to his front window, which had a clear view of my driveway. 2 moving trucks came and went. Big one coming tomorrow morning for the final load. I nodded, processing the information. Anyone else? Seen a woman with a clipboard yesterday? Looked like a real estate agent. That was unexpected. They're selling the house? Listing it. Looks like it. I saw her taking photos. I called James, who promised to check property records first thing in the morning. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I sat at Mark's kitchen table reviewing the documentation Alicia had prepared. Bank records showing Ellen's systematic draining of our accounts. Phone records revealing hours of calls to Ryan going back over 16 months. Credit card statements showing hotel charges in our own city on days she claimed to be visiting her mother. There was a cold clarity in seeing the evidence laid out, not just a momentary betrayal, but a calculated extraction, a deliberate dismantling of everything we'd built, piece by piece. By sunrise, James had texted confirmation. Ellen had listed our house with a real estate agency 3 days earlier. Asking price was an astonishing 35% below market value for a quick sale. She'd forged my signature on the listing agreement. At 8:30 a.m., I watched from Mark's kitchen window as Ellen and Ryan loaded the last items into Ryan's silver Mercedes. Small valuables, easy to transport. My grandfather's cufflinks, the vintage watch my father had given me before he died. At 8:45 a.m., a large moving truck pulled up. 4 men got out and approached the house. Right on schedule, at 8:55 a.m., an unmarked car parked directly behind the moving truck, blocking it in. 2 sheriff's deputies and a woman in a business suit emerged. James had sent a court officer along with them. It's time, I said to Mark. I walked across the street as the deputies approached my front door. Ellen answered, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion as the officers identified themselves. Mrs. Morgan, we have paperwork to serve you and the gentleman on the premises. I stayed just out of sight, watching from the edge of the driveway as the color drained from her face. She called for Ryan, who appeared behind her, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. That's when I stepped into view. The look on her face was one I'll never forget. Shock giving way to fear, then calculation. Ryan just looked confused. John, she whispered. You're supposed to be on the platform. Surprise, I said quietly, nodding to the deputies to proceed. They handed over the stack of documents, emergency restraining order against them, freezing of all assets, criminal complaint for forgery, nullification of the home listing, and notice of divorce proceedings citing fraud and criminal conspiracy. You can't do this, Ryan spoke up, puffing out his chest. She's afraid of you. Domestic violence claim dismissed this morning by Judge Ramirez, I interrupted. Hard to abuse someone from 5,000 miles away. The judge was particularly interested in the text messages discussing your Plan B involving my insurance policy. His face went slack. Ellen stepped forward, tears already forming. This is all a misunderstanding. I was just moving our belongings, I finished for her, gesturing to the moving truck. Protecting our assets by emptying our house. Planning our future by selling our home without telling me. She had no answer for that. You have 30 minutes to remove personal items only, the court officer stated. Clothing and toiletries. Everything else stays pending court inventory. As they went inside under supervision, I turned to walk away. Where are you going? Ellen called after me. I didn't look back. Home. The hearing took place 4 weeks later. I sat at one table with James, Ellen, and her lawyer at another. Ryan was conspicuously absent. He disappeared 3 days after being served, taking Ellen's remaining cash and jewelry with him. A familiar pattern, just as Alicia had discovered. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically: bank records, forged documents, text messages, location data. When she reached the messages discussing Plan B and insurance money, she stopped reading and looked directly at Ellen. "Mrs. Morgan, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud or worse?" Ellen's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. "It wasn't like that, Your Honor," Ellen stammered. "Ryan was just joking. I never would have." "Save it for the criminal proceedings," the judge interrupted. "This court's jurisdiction is the division of assets and dissolution of marriage." She continued reading through the documents, occasionally shaking her head. When she finished, she set the papers down and removed her glasses. "In my 28 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated financial deception in a marriage." She looked at Ellen. "You systematically drained joint accounts while forging documents and planning to flee the state with marital assets." Turning to me, her expression softened slightly. "Mr. Morgan, while your creation of separate accounts through a holding company might seem questionable to some, the court finds that you consistently paid household expenses, filed proper taxes, and made no attempt to hide assets from the government, only to protect them from potential future claims." Her ruling was swift and final. All assets transferred by Ellen would be returned to me. The house remained solely my property. Ellen's claims for spousal support were denied, and, most satisfyingly, she referred the forgery and conspiracy evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. As we left the courtroom, Ellen tried to approach me. I just kept walking. Some victories need no words. 7 months later, I stood on the deck of my cabin in the mountains outside Boulder, Colorado. The property had been part of Autumn Ridge Holdings all along, 35 acres of pine forest and meadow I purchased 6 years earlier as a retirement plan. Ellen never knew it existed. The forgery charges against her had been reduced in a plea deal, no jail time, but 4 years probation and restitution payments she'd likely never complete. Last I heard, she was living with her mother in Oklahoma City, working retail. Ryan had moved on to a divorced executive in California. His pattern continues unbroken. I took early retirement from the oil company. 25 years was enough. Between my investments, savings, and the small natural gas royalties from a property in Arkansas, I had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Mark called occasionally with updates from Dallas. I'd sold the house there, too many memories, none of them good anymore. He'd helped clear out the last of my belongings, shipping the family heirlooms to Colorado and donating the rest. The afternoon mail brought an envelope from Alicia. Final paperwork showing the dissolution of Autumn Ridge Holdings. Its purpose was complete. Assets transferred. Taxes paid. A chapter closed. As the sun set behind the mountains, I poured a glass of scotch and sat in the Adirondack chair I'd built that summer. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. No crew waiting for instructions. No wife pretending to miss me. Just quiet and the sound of wind in the pines. My phone rang. A new operations manager at a Canadian energy company offering a consulting position. Good money, minimal travel. Just sharing expertise I'd accumulated over decades. "I'll think about it," I told him, and I would, but not tonight. Tonight was just for me. For the peace I'd earned. For the life I was finally living. On my own terms.